Hey y'all, welcome to Geek Freaks. I am Frank, and today I'm joined by Moroni Aguilar. How you doing, Moroni?
Good. How you doing, Frank?
I am doing wonderful. We're going to be talking about Myth Makers today. This is your fourth book now that you're putting out for Myth Makers. Can you break down what this world is like, what the story of Myth Makers is?
Yeah, so Myth Makers is a story about a group of different heroes from around the world who kind of came together, sort of like an adventure type event where a big bad just kind of showed up, and they happened to be there or kind of come together at the time to defeat this enemy. And that's kind of like our connecting first two issues. But the story of Mythmakers is really a family story. You got this group of misfits who are very different. Again, they're from around the world. Some of them are new to being heroes. We have one hero who's specifically been a hero for a long time, but they're coming together as a family and a team, to help people around the world because that's who they are and that's who they want to be. The world is a superhero world. It's kind of like your Marvel and DC world where people exist, but we also have heroes. But it's a mixture of a lot of cool sci-fi things as well. But I try to focus mainly on the characters, give it character-driven stories, which is something I've always liked as a kid.
And in this one, where did you come up with the name Myth Makers for this one?
So Mythmakers was like I'm bad with coming up with names, and me and my friends, a couple of my friends were helping me out, try to hash out ideas and whatnot. So I had like 100 names I went through, and I don't necessarily remember where Mythmakers came from.
Mhm.
But it was the name we liked the most. It's like these are, superheroes are modern myths.
Yeah.
Every adventure, Spider-Man goes through, Batman goes through. They're modern myths and stories that we tell now and we enjoy, with the movies and everything. So I just kind of liked it. I decided to go with Mythmakers.
It's funny you bring that up because after reading some of your work and stuff like that, I did start to think about how, yeah, like even the Flash Museum, like it is creating these myths that today we put these fables onto. We all know respect and honor and stuff like that because we could mirror it through Superman and whatnot. So that is a really good name, and it just makes me rethink of how all superheroes are. So it's pretty cool. I like that.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have this amazing team that you have put together from all around the world with such different backgrounds and stuff like that. The last issue we focused on loss with, the Crimson Warrior going through loss. He's kind of our veteran superhero at this point. Is there a theme that you wanted to focus in on with book 4?
So book 4 is a continuation of that. Not to get too many spoilers from the last issues. Yeah, Crimson Warrior, he was part of an old superhero team. He's kind of like our Power Rangers type character. So he was part of, like, when he was younger, a Power Rangers type team. Um, it's a little bit of spoilers, but that team perished. We haven't given a lot of details, but they were his family, And it's like, how do you deal with losing your family? So in the last issue, we touched a little bit on it. In this fourth issue, we touch on it a lot more. It definitely haunts him in a lot of ways. And you'll see when the issue's out and people read it. He's thinking about it and it's affecting him in the last issue, but it's front and center in this issue. And we really see how it's affecting him and keeping him from making new connections, which is, again, dealing with loss. How do you deal with it? How do you move past it? Again, in a lot of superhero media, you always have it. Superheroes die all the time, and I know they're like, well, heroes come back in comic books and all the time, but I mean, what if they don't? What if it's been years? Even if someone dies, if you don't see him for 5, 10 years, that's a long period of time. How do you deal with that loss? So it's something we wanted to tell, and it's definitely these issue 3 and 4, which is something I've been doing. Every 2 issues are kind of like one complete story. You can read them standalone, but they connect to tell an overarching story. But like I said, the third issue deals with loss, and the fourth issue is continuing that story and kind of not finishing it because you don't get over loss quickly, but it does
Right.
continue that story.
Yeah, and then it's amplified with the fact that he was a young hero at the time, a Power Ranger, like a Teen Titan, Young Justice, and that found family that's such a fun thing to explore in comic books. Well, what if that found family is destroyed? Is the new found family aspect, how are they going to support somebody who is experiencing loss?
Yeah, so um, this is kind of like the beginning of that answer. This
Yeah.
fourth issue. In the last issue, the team members, they came together in the last two issues.
Mhm.
They really liked being a team. They felt like they could make a change in the world. So they've come to Tokyo to reach out to the Crimson Warrior because the rest of them decided like, hey, yeah, let's be a team. And he was a little more reluctant to join them. So
Right.
they're here to, they can see he's suffering a little bit. They don't know why. Some of the team members think he's kind of like just a jerk or whatever. But they're reaching out. Yeah. They're reaching out to him, someone who needs help. He's this person who is alone. And if he's left alone for too long, he's just going to go down this dark road.
Yeah.
And they feel it. They feel it in their hearts and their bodies. So, in this next issue, and again, not giving too much
Of
away,
course.
it's the beginning of him healing. All those cracks are still there, but one of the cracks is healing now, and that's again, it takes a long time to heal from loss, and there is no time frame.
Mhm.
Essentially, you lose someone, you can never get over it, but you can have people in your life who help you appreciate life again.
And not to be lost in this comic book format, but yeah, we're dealing with this complex story, but in the background, still you're in Tokyo with things attacking Tokyo, so you also get the fun action of the comics. What was your inspiration for kind of those action scenes in your comics?
Yeah, so I mean, I love action movies. I
Mhm.
love comic book stories. Explosions, monsters. What's not to love? Um, so, of course, I want to tell a personal story about loss and everything like that. But this is
Right.
a superhero story, and every good superhero story needs some action. So, in Tokyo, what do you think of, or what I think of Tokyo? I think of Godzilla,
Oh
monsters,
yeah.
kaiju's, or whatever. I mean, I didn't go that epic, but of course, I have a monster that somewhat looks Godzilla,
Mhm.
and then we have a few more monsters that show up this at the end of the last issue, but definitely are prominent in this issue. It's just a lot of fun to have, some cool action. You have superheroes, let them show off their powers. It's fun.
Yeah. And kaiju are modern myths as well. Like that is something that we kind of tell ourselves. That's a lot of fun with that.
Yeah.
With this with this team, it is so they're so unique from each other. Like they're not like with the Power Rangers is a good example. The Red Rangers, they're very similar to the green and to the pink, and but these guys have come across the globe. What was some of your inspirations from pulling from certain places? Like Gravidad, clearly like the Mexican wrestler, and you could imagine in the ring next to Star Fragment, almost looks like from another universe or something like that. Devil Dog in the mean streets of New York or something. How did you get inspiration for these people?
Yeah. So the ideas came from a lot of the things I liked when I was younger. I
Yeah.
loved Power Rangers when I was little. I loved wrestling when I was younger. So, Crimson Warrior is a Power Ranger. Gravidad is a Mexican wrestler. You got Devil Dog, who's kind of, I love street level superheroes, Daredevil and stuff like that. So he's kind of a hero like that. You have Star Fragment. I like she's kind of like the anime equivalent. I like Sailor
Oh,
Moon when I
good.
was a little kid.
Yeah.
So she's that magical girl type character. I like punk music when I was younger. So T-Volts, he's kind of a punk type character, just kind of dressed up with a leather jacket and a shirt. Really, not
Yeah.
really a costume, but he's out there in the streets. And then Frequency is just like I always like characters with sound powers. I always think
Mhm.
it's interesting. And down the road, I hope to do some interesting stories with her. It's a cool, interesting power you can do. Like I love Batman Beyond, and he has a
Yeah.
character named Shriek, who has sound powers. And there's some cool episodes where like he just all the sound is gone in an episode, and it's just like super interesting. And like I hope to do like stories like how do I make that interesting in a visual medium? It's sound. You can't really see sound, but how do you make it interesting? So that's something I hope to explore. But that's kind of how I came up with these characters. It's kind of like playing with my toys as a little kid,
Yeah.
which is kind of what I want to do. I was thinking about it. I was like, if I made my own team, I could be like, oh, let me pull Batman and Superman and Spider Man, But
Yeah.
I'm like, that is cool, and it's cool to see that in comic books. But realistically, like, go all out. Why
Oh
wouldn't you
yeah.
pull from like I love the Red Ranger. Let me pull the Red Ranger or whatever. Or, Rey Mysterio, let me pull
Yeah.
Rey Mysterio. How would you work with these superhero characters, So just stuff like that. Yeah, that's where my ideas came from.
Oh
My
yeah.
love and interest.
And most of us kids didn't have matching action figures. So yeah, no doubt we had, I remember having like Raph from TMNT fighting some random wrestler I had. And I don't know, we'll find a reason for them to fight it out. It was fun. That's how
Yeah,
you did
yeah,
it.
exactly.
When you're working on these comics, first off, is this your first comic book?
Mythmakers, yeah. I mean, when I was little, I used to draw my own comic
Right.
books and stuff like that. But an actual printed comic book, yeah, Mythmakers is definitely the first series that I created and printed.
So what got you to start doing comic books in the first place?
So I love animation. I love comic books. Animation got me into comic books. I used to watch, Batman the animated series and Spider
Yeah.
Man and stuff like that, and it got me into comic books. And when I was younger, I wanted to be an animator, which I ended up not really pursuing as I got older. It's
Yeah.
one of those dreams. But I always love art, and I always want to create and tell stories. I think around 2018, I saw a lot of people on like Twitter and stuff talking about making comics, and I've seen people make indie comics, but for some reason it clicked. I was like, hey,
Yeah.
I can make my own comics. Put it on Kickstarter and potentially print them. Not thinking I'm gonna make like a ton of money, but it'd be fun to do that. If I'm gonna create comics, that'd be a way to do it. So that's kind of how I saw other indie creators out there just creating comic books, and it definitely inspired me to, hey, yeah, why am I not trying to do this? It's something I love. We should all pursue our passions, even if
Yeah.
we don't do anything big or spectacular. Do what you love. I love comic books. I love making them. I love creating characters and stories. It's a fun thing to do, and said, yeah, let's do it. Let's
Yeah.
do it.
So 2018, over the past 7 years, what have you learned in the comic book journey?
I've learned a lot. I learned a lot. I was never the greatest writer in school or ever. I never thought I was going to be a writer. Like reading, writing, I can do that. But not to an advanced level. So learning how to write a comic book script was a process. Learning how to hire an artist, to
Yeah.
design characters and working with them, designing those characters, hiring someone to draw the comic, hiring someone to color the comic. There's like a lot involved. I had my first two comics I lettered myself, and so I had to teach myself how to letter and how to use a bunch of driven programs like Krita and Inkscape and stuff like that, and the rules of lettering,
Yeah.
and how to market yourself. I'm a quiet person in
Yeah.
real life. It's hard for me even to go on social media and talk or post things. A lot of the times, it's something I'm still working on, but that's definitely one of the biggest lessons I learned. Just like you got to put yourself out there. That's definitely advice you hear from people. Is like you keep telling people you have a comic out there because they're not going to see it. You just gotta keep voicing yourself and putting your stuff out there because you're thinking like, oh, well, I'll put it out there. But with social media, everything moves so fast. Like, even
Yeah.
if you post like 100 times a day, there's not a guarantee that, 200 people would see that.
Hmm.
So that was definitely a big thing I learned. But yeah, there's a lot of different things I learned through the process, creating, marketing. It's definitely a lot, but it's been a fun journey.
Yeah, there's so many facets that people don't think about. Marketing is such a big one because, it must be fun to use social media for fun. Because for other of us, it's becomes part of the job and sometimes the most hectic
Yeah.
part of it. How do you approach social media? And when you're trying to market yourself as someone who's like myself as well, I'm like a big fan of getting myself out there, but you just have to. What is it that kind of makes you take that step?
That's a good question. Again, like I said, I'm doing not the greatest at putting myself out there. I think we like to connect with others.
Yeah,
To me, again, social media was kind of created in this idea that we can connect with people across the world quick and easy. Again, in 2018, when I saw all those indie creators, it was really cool. A lot of those creators are still around, and they're very good at presenting themselves. It just
Yeah.
seems natural and easy to do it. Um, I try to be myself, but again, it's one of those things where like I'm a quiet person, so I'm like, oh, look at this cool thing. But in real life, I'd probably be like, oh, that's cool, and that'd be my comment. I wouldn't be like,
Yeah.
hey, look at this, so badass. It reminds me of this. Like, I'm not that type of person, so it's kind of pushing myself to open up and be like, say a little bit more. Like, not just like,
Yeah.
hey, it's cool. Like, why is it cool? Why would I
Yeah.
like this? Why would others like it? So again, it's a learning process, and I'm working on it. But
It is.
that's what I'm trying to move towards.
Yeah. And then you were talking about building a team around you. What was the process in finding a artist, and how do you work with your artist in creating your work together?
That's a good question. Um, so my first artist for my first two issues, PR Didalis, I butchering his last name. Sorry. uh, um, I found him on Facebook. There's a lot of groups like on Facebook and Twitter and stuff dedicated to artists looking for work.
Hmm.
So I joined one of those groups just looking for an artist. You get a lot of responses. There's a lot of people out there hungry to create. Um, so I just kind of looked through a lot of the art that one I could afford to pay an artist, a certain artist, but art that I also liked, similar to some of my favorite comic styles and whatnot. Also, someone who seems cool and you can work with. Just because someone's an amazing artist, they give me an asshole, and you don't want to. Is it okay if I
Right.
cuss?
Oh yeah, it is. Yeah, yeah, you're fine.
Okay, okay. If someone's an asshole, you don't want to work with someone like that,
Yeah.
So you do a little digging, if they're posting on Facebook, you can go a little bit through their account. If they seem like a cool person, like,
Hmm.
yeah, okay, cool. If they're out there just cussing people out and stuff, you're like,
Yeah, I don't want
um,
any of that smoke.
yeah, exactly, exactly. But with working with artists, I kind of just leave them to their own devices for the most part.
Yeah.
There's a few ways how people create comics. Some people are a lot more involved, like, hey, I want this character positioned here and everything, really describing panels in the most descriptive ways. So there's not a lot of room for artists to interpret. And even then, looking at their um, initial images they draw, the thumbnails and everything like that, you can be like, well, I don't like it, which you should be doing that stuff. But
Right.
also, we're a team, I don't want to, like, it's a co-creating really. Unless you're drawing and writing and doing everything, it's a co-creation. So I let them do a lot. If there's a panel where I feel like, hey, it can have a little emotion, or just if they forgot something, like, oh, you forgot to put this character in here, and they, I want them to be seen because they're gonna show up later or whatever. Just stuff like that. But I'm pretty hands off. I let them do their things. Again, I've been lucky to work with some great artists. They know what they're doing, and they're able
Yeah.
to transcribe my scripts in the best possible ways. Which, yeah, if you have a great artist, let them do their thing.
Yeah, it's a gift to find a good one. Is there anything
Mhm.
that you've pulled from your art, like maybe they've added something to the story, or an element that you didn't think about and you wanted to incorporate back into the writing?
That is a good question. Um, Personality, I would say it's one of the things. Definitely when I write, I have a certain way of how I think my characters' personalities are, and I hope that
Mhm.
my scripts convey that. And when the finished product comes out, I hope it conveys it. But a lot of times, or there's been a few times where the artist has drawn a character with like a smirk or something, or just
Yeah.
looking really cool, and I'm just like, oh, okay, I see how you're seeing this character, so it helps me develop the character, the next time I write him, or for the next issue, or even for the panels, I'll be like, I liked how you kind of make him cocky over here. Let's make him keep him cocky, a little bit more
Yeah.
because it seems to work for the character. So just stuff like that.
Yeah, it's nice to kind of pull it out of your own thought palace and then kind of see how the character would live on its own over here. And it takes other
Mhm.
people collaborating to really flesh that out. That is pretty cool.
Yeah.
So with the world building that you're doing here with Mythmakers, how big are you wanting to extend this world? How far are you wanting to take Mythmakers into the future?
Uh, so one of my dreams is really, I would love to make like 100 issues of a
Nice.
comic book,
Hmm.
and I have a lot of stories and ideas. So with 100 issues, that's a bunch of different stories, a ton of new characters, which expands the world. Like I have ideas for new characters. But also, I have characters that I want to introduce into this world that, probably have their own solo comic. Like, after this fourth issue, I'm working on getting another comic book issue, just a one shot from another character who is kind of part of this world. Because one of the things I love about superhero comics is that you can connect different characters, not necessarily by them meeting, but like, let's say in Marvel, there's that Hydra or AIM or whatever.
Yeah.
There are these organizations that exist. So Captain America can fight them in their issue, but Spider-Man can fight them in their issue too. So it connects their world. So that's something I hope to do too, create like evil organizations, or even just like in Green Lantern, the Green Lantern Corps exists. There's the rings and everything
Yeah.
like that. So these myths and powers that, connect different characters, and, maybe they're not sharing the same book, but they're sharing the same world. So, I mean, it's a dream. I think a lot of people dream of creating big superhero worlds, and I'll see if I ever get there. But in a dream scenario, it'd be a big, massive world, and the myth makers, even if they're the least at least like characters, they're still going in their own ongoing.
Yeah. Now, with this world that you're building, and say, hey, 100 issues, it's out there. You could totally do that. Are you looking at building a long history? Because you're saying this is a world that already has multiple superheroes in it. When were superheroes first introduced into this world, or is that already kind of built into the story?
So for a lot of the characters, actually for all the myth makers, I do have uh, backstories for them, specifically for like Crimson Warrior. He's been around for a long time, but his powers have been around for thousands of years. Kind of,
Okay.
none of the issues I'm writing right now kind of go into it, but there is a backstory of where these powers came from. It wasn't just some scientists and giving it away who created them. They come
Yeah.
from somewhere specific, which I hope to explore. It's kind of like all these other like Marvel and DCs. They have long histories because they've been around a long time. But when you create a new world, you either create it like superheroes just came into existing, in modern day, or they've existed for a long time. And I just kind of like the idea of them existing for a long time.
Yeah.
um, it is interesting to see a world be like, whoa, superheroes, this is new and interesting. How do we deal with it? But it's also very interesting to see a world where you have organizations already set up that deal with superheroes, like hey, Shield, they would handle superheroes or
Yeah.
stuff like that, or like legacy characters. Legacy characters are also cool. Like, how do you tell a story with a legacy character? So yeah, again, like these issues don't go into it too much, but yeah, the
Yeah.
superheroes have existed for a long time. They're definitely out there, and it's definitely something I want to introduce. The more issues I tell, um, so hopefully I get there where you see more of this world and its inception.
Yeah. So when you're developing an actual already lived in superhero world, what kind of changes to their world would be different than our world with all these superheroes running amok?
Yeah, and that's the interesting thing about comic books. Like Marvel is, they're always like the superhero outside your window or something like that. Is
Yeah.
they're saying DC, they're more modern gods in a lot of ways. You have Superman.
Well
They
said.
have this
Yeah.
big, yeah, echelon. Um, so we have, or I have characters who are all like that. Just your down to earth characters, but also your hey, not necessarily like a god, but the way I envision it is like they're big celebrities. There's
Mm,
that's like kind of like the big thing now. Not necessarily someone you worship as a king or whatever, but you worship him as a celebrity kind of thing. So
yeah.
there's heroes like that, and the myth makers. You have some powerful characters. Like again, a lot of these characters are new, and they don't have the greatest handle on their powers. In a real world, they'd be like gods, but they're really normal people.
Hmm.
If I got powers today, I more or less be the same person. I would like to think.
Right.
Awkward and weird. People will probably treat me differently. Um, but I'm still a person,
Right.
even if I could fly, I'm just like, hey, I'm still kind of a person. I'm still going to be intimidated by, certain people and whatnot. But yeah, the myth makers are a little bit more down to earth. Like, I hope to make them characters that you could see in the real world who just happen to have powers,
Yeah.
and on their off days, they're chilling and hanging out, and they're just like, gotta take breaks.
Well, I like the way that you said that they are kind of celebrities because that would make somebody like, again, going back to the Crimson Warrior, as he's been around for a while. He's your Chuck Norris. He's been around for a while. He comes back here and there. But then on the other side of that, with like Gravidad, who's kind of like this up and coming sports star almost. And then like, oh yeah, I also am a, just, a superhero on the side. But you might actually be a celebrity because you're a wrestler too. It's fun to think of that lived in world.
Yeah, exactly. It's there's a lot of how do you convey these heroes? What are they like
Yeah.
today? It's just fun to think about it, and I hope to express it in more stories down the road.
Yeah. That's pretty cool. When you're developing this book and you're wanting to introduce new characters, do you ever have overarching villains? Do you put that kind of thought into the villains as well, or are you trying to do kind of a villain of the week kind of thing, more of a Saturday morning cartoon?
So I do have some villains that one specific villain who's definitely going to show up a lot more. Um, there are some villains that are like villain of the weeks.
Yeah,
In the last issue, there's a villain who gets beaten by the Crimson Warrior really easily. He's kind of like a gag character
yeah, those are
that I
fun.
hope to bring back more. Again, like in a world of superheroes and supervillains, you're gonna have your A tier superhero or
Yeah,
supervillains, and then you have your like Z tier ones who like they're out there trying to do their job,
yeah, like the
whatever
Condiment King for
they're
Batman or something like that. Yeah,
exactly. So I love those kind of characters,
me
like
too.
Kite Man was turned into like this big, like, hell
Yeah,
yeah, it's a character. So they're fun characters. And I know people are like, yeah, look at that loser character, but like
yeah.
they return for a reason, they're
Hmm.
fun characters. And even though they might not be the big bag who's returning all the time, it's fun to see them, they're
Yeah.
trying, they're
You
trying their
almost root for
best.
them too. You're almost like, come on, buddy, you can
Yeah,
get this bank.
exactly. Yeah.
Oh, that's a blast. So currently you're self-publishing this right through Sunbreaker. That's your company, correct?
Um, So Sunbreaker came about when I was about to release my first issue.
Mhm.
It's like what do I call? Um, do I just call it myth makers?
Right.
Am I just making this first comic, or should I make like a company that it's an umbrella for other things that I create? So I was like, yeah, I love one of the things that when you look at a Marvel comic, it says Marvel. You look into the comic DC,
Yeah.
it lets them know that certain people are working on these products, these amazing comic books and whatnot. So I was like, yeah, like, of course I'm going to do that because everyone does that. Everyone who creates a comic, they do that. Why
Yeah.
wouldn't I do it as well? So I was thinking of a name, and I'm just like, again, I'm bad at naming things, so I'm just like
No.
crossing out like this. Oh, this would be cool. No, that's corny. Or let me Google it. Oh, it's taken. You know what I mean?
Oh
And
yeah.
then Sunbreaker. I think it was back in the back of my head from a video game series. Oh shoot, what was it
Okay.
called? But there's like a character that I think it's ability or something called Sunbreaker, and I think it just popped in my head one day, and I'm like
Yeah.
Sunbreaker. Yeah, I like it. I'm like I can envision like a superhero just punching the sun and just shattering it. So I'm
Yeah.
like, yeah, Sunbreaker. I'll go with that.
Sounds like a
Sounded
good hero
good.
name or villain name actually too. Yeah, that'd be perfect. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're self-publishing this. Is there anything that you find adds a little extra level of difficulty to self-publishing? And would you want to bring other people into this publishing house of yours?
It's definitely hard. Besides the art and the coloring, I've pretty much done everything myself.
Yeah.
So I have to format all the images and everything to a certain format, make sure all the lettering and everything's correct, and then sending it to the printer. When it comes back, I check the product to make sure it's good. Um, then I put in my order, and then when it comes in, I package it and everything. I send it out. I sent out the emails like, "Hey, I sent it out," or here's,
Yeah.
and there's been times where like, "Oh, I didn't get my comic." Like, okay, let me check on it, or let me send you another issue. I don't know what happened to it, type thing. You know, like I love the creative aspect of it, and I definitely would want to work with other people creatively because that's always fun. Like,
Yeah.
hey, let's write a story together, or hey, let me help you produce a comic or something. But I would also love someone to help with the menial stuff. If I'm being
Yeah. Oh yeah.
honest, like, hey, come over. Buy drinks, whatever, dinner.
Yeah.
let's package all these comics and mail them out. It'll be a fun time.
You trick your friends into like, hey, it's game night. And then it's
Yeah,
actually
exactly.
like, you're going to put everything in sleeves.
Comics, yeah.
Oh, man. Well, I hope Sunbreaker and, of course, Myth Makers really continues to keep growing. The art is wonderful. The story is fantastic. I can't wait to see where it goes from here. Where can people find you, Moroni, and follow your story?
Um, so I am definitely on Blue Sky right now for the
Yeah.
most part.
I'm trying
And
to get better at
threads.
this guy. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I've been posting on, social media has been kind of crazy these days, but
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
definitely on Blue Sky a lot of the time and threads. So you can find me on there. Sunbreaker E, I think is usually my handle. It's
Mhm.
Campbell Entertainment. But yeah, if you look for me on Blue Sky, I'm on there. I usually post at least every few days. I try to do
Yeah.
more. Again, I'm bad at it.
Practice makes perfect. I know it seems like it's never ending to be your own marketer. So we're
Yeah.
gonna have links to your Blue Sky threads. We're gonna also have the Kickstarter guys you can join on Myth Makers. There's only gonna be a couple weeks left when this episode comes out, so make sure you guys join along. Moroni, thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I really appreciate it.
Oh no, thank you for having me on. It's been fun.
Absolutely. All right, guys, we will see you next week. Make sure you follow everything in the description. Bye.